Today is Monday, January 20th, 2025. This is Quick Start from CBN News. I'm Dan Andros. Inauguration Day is finally here. We'll have that top story and more on today's podcast, where we bring you news from a Christian perspective. Subscribe, leave a rating. That would help us out a lot. We'd appreciate if you do that on whatever podcast platform you're listening to this on. You can email us as well, quickstartpodcast@cbn.org. Goes directly to our inbox. We'd love to hear from you. As we're getting through the news of the crate together, we're so glad you're here with us each and every weekday, bright and early. And joining me today, CBN's Billy Hallowell, who's in Washington, D.C. A lot to get to, obviously, with the inauguration today, Billy, but on the focus, you've got a former political operative delivering a powerful message, and this comes at a time when the country is pretty divided.
Yeah, we're going to be talking about Bunni pounds and really interesting stories. She is not only a political operative, but she ran for Congress, and we're going to get into how she loved her enemies today.
All right, and we will look forward to the details there on the focus story. On the main thing, Abby Johnson, pro-life advocate, joins the Quick Start podcast today. Talk all things pro-life. And don't forget to subscribe to all of our CBN News podcasts, DC Debrief with John Stolnis, Billy's Newsmakers. Also, we've got our 4-part series, Jesus and the Prophecies of Christmas. I know we're well past Christmas, but there's never a bad time to check out Scripture and how the Old Testament points to the birth of Christ. Great 4-part series. Make sure you check that out. The links are all in the description of this podcast episode here. All right, we're going to head now to the news in 90 seconds. Donald Trump takes office today as the 47th president, marking a historic comeback. He's only the second president to win a non-consecutive term, and he's got a bold agenda and a clear mandate heading forward here. According to former press secretary Sean Spicer, Trump's approach this term focuses on people, process, and policy, surrounding himself with trusted allies rather than relying on the D.C. establishment. Key priorities for Trump's first 100 days include passing a border security bill to finish the wall, repealing Biden's climate initiatives, and extending the tax cuts that spurred economic growth during his first term. Executive orders will also be a major focus, with over 100 expected on day one, that's today, targeting illegal immigration, energy development, and reinforcing policies on gender distinctions. Trump's agenda also includes potential pardons for January 6 defendants, discussions on acquiring Greenland, and efforts to expand peace agreements in Ukraine and the Middle East. Incoming press secretary Carolyn Leavitt will spearhead communications, with Spicer advising her to align every message with Trump's vision and strategy. That's the big story today. Make sure you check out more on cbnnews.com. Another big story over the weekend, the Israel-Hamas ceasefire began on Sunday morning, and there were the return of 3 hostages. There were mixed emotions on this as the 3 hostages were reunited with their families, but there was this bizarre ceremony done by Hamas to try to propagandize the whole thing as a victory for them, certificates of release. They had like this chilling farewell thing going on, and then you start to see the Hamas operatives who were released that they're going to be in exchange, and there's some horrific killers on that list as well. So it's very much mixed emotions here. Happy to see these hostages come home, but then you see these terrorists go out, and as Lindsey Graham said, it's impossible to have lasting peace with Hamas in power, because their whole stated goal is to destroy Israel. So it's just not going to happen. So a lot of coverage on that on cbnnews.com and on our YouTube channel as well with our team in Israel. But obviously the big news today here in America is Trump and the inauguration. And Billy, it's a huge deal. And listen, we're going to see what happens today. Protests, no protests. The country is divided, but I think people have been suffering under the reality is economically it's been tough. The country's more divided than ever. So perhaps people are just willing to turn a corner at this point.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is what is happening. I mean, I'm in DC, I'm interacting, and it's anecdotal, but with a lot of people from Uber drivers down to people who have come in for the inauguration, and there's a real sense of, people have hope. They want something different. And I think that when you have an election, and this happens a lot of times in elections where the country's in a strange place, things are rough, that hope is what drives people sometimes to change their mind at the polls, to vote in a way they haven't. And so I've interacted with numerous people who actually voted for Biden the first time and didn't vote for Harris the second time. So it's going to be an interesting time because I think Trump has a real opportunity. But with that opportunity, I think comes a lot of pressure, right? You've got to live up to that expectation that you can deliver this hope that people are pining for. And I think we're seeing that across the country right now. Country's still divided, but there are more people tipping the scales back towards this idea of quote unquote, hope and change, which is what drove Obama years ago.
Yeah, really is. And, we'll be covering it all on the CBN News YouTube channel today. Make sure you're checking that out. Our Faith Nation team will be covering all the events and the swearing in and all the ceremonies that happen. And then Billy and myself and Trey Guns Phillips will continue the extended coverage after the Faith Nation team signs off, and we will be monitoring everything that's going on. So go bookmark it. Go to the CBN News YouTube channel. We'd love to have you there with us as we cover everything that's going on. We'll see if we'll be tracking for protests and things of that nature as everything goes down. But we're going to go to the focus story now. And as Billy just talked about moments ago, a former congressional candidate and political operative is delivering a powerful message about compassion and empathy for our enemies. What's the story here?
Yeah, this is a story I love. Her name is Bunni Pounds, and it's a great name. But she's the founder and president of Christians Engaged, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that is in a moment. But she's been out there speaking about this need for Christians to really remember Jesus's call, right? Even when you're navigating politics, this is somebody who's run for Congress, who has been a political operative, and she's a believer. And she's like, look, we have to follow Jesus. She said, the first commandment is to love Jesus with all your heart, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbors as ourselves. She said, we do not cease to be Christ followers if we get involved in politics and government. It's interesting because, again, this is somebody who has this experience, and politics can be very cutthroat. But she said that she relies on consistent prayer and a relationship with Jesus, and she wants to see other Christians do that so that they can have real impact in all of these different arenas. And so really just a powerful message from somebody who's experienced it all in politics.
Yeah, and she's lived out this idea of living, loving her enemy on a very public stage. So what happened in her life?
Yeah, so okay, there's one big example, and this is interesting. She was running for Texas's 5th congressional district. This is back in 2018. And she's in the middle of this race. We know how politics can be. She said she lost that race by 2,700 votes. There were 43,000 votes. She lost it by 2,700. It's a pretty close race. And she said her opponent, though, this was a Republican runoff, so she wasn't in the general. She was up against another Republican. She said that at the end, so this campaign ends, she loses, but that his consultants had floated her opponent all of the invoices. So that means all of his TV, his mail, his radio ads, consulting fees, all these things, they hadn't yet been billed. And so they basically got billed later on, and he ended up in debt. And so as far as Bunni Pounds went, she's like, look, I was out raising him despite losing. She's like, I was out raising him. She had money. She apparently had a well-managed campaign with funding, even though she lost. And she said, when I finished the campaign, I paid off all my bills. And she's like, and I couldn't win. And she said the injustice of that was really digging at her heart. She was mad she didn't win, right? She's like, here's somebody in debt. I'm not in debt. I didn't win. And she said, a year later, I heard the Lord say, you are not going to get through this if you don't do something drastic to impact your heart. And she found herself really listening to God's prompting, and she ended up calling her former opponent. So here's the guy who beat her in the Republican runoff. She called him, she had lunch with him, and she asked if she could help him pay off the rest of his $50,000 in debt. So she went out of her way to say, look, I lost to you. I had the money. You didn't have it. Let me help you pay off your debt. And She said they hosted a big party and she fundraised and she helped him pay off all of that debt, all of the consultant fees, all of those things. And she said it really helped her bitterness and her unforgiveness go away, right? She was able to get completely free from this frustration of not winning, of by actually stepping out to help this person who was, quote unquote, her enemy. And she said it was really a testimony of God's grace.
Yeah, that's awesome. And, you can imagine the frustration there. And sometimes that's how it is. Something grinds against us, and then God calls us to do something higher, and it's easier said than done. What's another example that can offer healing and hope in these divided political times?
Yeah, so she's running this organization, Christians Engaged. I'd encourage people to check it out. She's trying to inspire Christians to, again, regardless of what party a person is in, to love people, to show them the truth, to be guided by their faith more. She said, and this is kind of wild, and she's told me this story a couple of times, but she had this dream. She was standing before Beto O'Rourke, if you remember
Oh,
him,
yeah.
and she was standing before him, telling him that God loves him, loves his family, and sees that he loves people. And she kept seeing. She doesn't agree with him at all, politically, but she kept having this dream, and she's like thinking to herself, "Why am I having this dream? This is kind of strange." But 3 months later, she ended up meeting him when he was running for Texas governor, and she really felt like it was a divine setup. They exchanged information. And she said this, and I thought this was interesting. She said, I've never felt the presence of God like I did when I prayed for him. She ended up asking if she could pray for him when they met, and they started texting. They've become friends. And she said she was deeply affected by this because, again, she's trying to be committed to God's truth. This is somebody she disagrees with, and yet she's stepping out, praying for that person, and forming a friendship and a relationship. And I don't know where he stands on faith, but this is how you end up winning people over to faith, right? You show them love, you guide them, you come alongside them. So just another interesting example of crossing the line to befriend somebody who is different. And I think this is, an important thing for us right now.
Yes, I mean, the inauguration is today. That's obviously the big story today. And so you think about this example here as Trump's coming in, the country, even though Trump won decisively, there's still whatever 75 million people or whatever the number was that voted the other way, right? So there are a lot of divisions in the country right now. So when you think of this story and this way that Bunny is talking about approaching things, what do you think the connection is here on Inauguration Day?
Yeah, I think the big connection is a lot of people, as you were just saying, around us are not happy today, right? And that doesn't mean people who are happy shouldn't be, but I think the reality is knowing that there are a lot of people who don't need to be yelled at politically, who don't need to be told that they're wrong for who they voted for. It's okay to think they're wrong, but they need prayer. They need what Bunny did. They need you to show up, pray for them, introduce them to the real truth, because becoming a Republican or a Democrat or voting a certain way is not going to save you. Only having a relationship with Jesus Christ is going to save you, right? So we get hung up in those details sometimes of the temporal, the political, but I think what she's shown us here is that in the midst of chaos, we can actually speak truth and hope and really help people see through the fog.
Yeah, amen to that. And listen, as Christians, obviously we want people that represent our views and the things that we would like to see going forward. But ultimately, our main aim here is to draw more people to Christ, draw more people into the fold of believers in Jesus Christ. And so let's keep that eye on that prize as we're, striving for all of these other things in the political world as well. So, all right, we're going to head over to the main thing now. And mom of 8 and best-selling author Abby Johnson still pushing on the pro-life movement here, even though Roe v. Wade has passed. She's got a children's book this month. It's called What's in Mommy's Tummy, and she joined Madison Seals to share the backstory, why this is a timely and important topic for children and adults. That's today's main thing.
Well, Abby, first of all, congrats on the new book. This is the first children's book that you've written. What inspired you to write it?
Well, honestly, I was in the airport one day and I was scrolling through social media and I saw that there were a couple of books coming out for children. There were board books coming out for children that were abortion positive. And, board books are generally children's books that are for kids between the ages of 3 and 5. And, we are born to know that life is sacred. We are all born pro-life. No child would ever say, yes, it's okay to kill a baby in the womb, right? It's not until we get older that we really start justifying sin. And I thought, oh my gosh, they are trying to introduce, people who support abortion are trying to introduce the idea that killing babies is acceptable to children who are aged 3 to 5 years old. And I absolutely could not believe it. And I had never even thought about writing a children's book, honestly, but I was in the airport. I boarded a plane. I was so disturbed by this idea that I just pulled out my computer and I started writing. And it was like a 2-hour flight. And by the time I landed, I had this book typed out. And I got off the plane and I called one of my close friends and said, I just wrote a children's book and I want to get this published. I want to get this out. We need good books that are fun, that children will want to read over and over again, that they'll want to go back to their bookshelf and pull it out because they're funny, they're fun, they're engaging. But there's also a good lesson in them. And I contacted Focus on the Family, and I've, done books with them before, and they loved the idea. And so I'm contracted with them now to write at least 6 books. But this book has my son Luke in it, and I have 8 children, so I need to pump out at least 8 so I can cover all of my children in a children's book.
Yeah, that's so exciting. And what a great response to a problem, too, that you saw a need for more children's books to teach about the value of life and didn't just complain about it, but came out with an alternative. So that's awesome. And can you share a little bit more about the character Luke in this story?
Sure. So it's just a little boy, Luke, and his mom is pregnant, and he sees her getting bigger and bigger. And he starts to have questions about what may be growing in his mommy's tummy. And he kind of envisions that it might be some fun things for him to play with, some things that maybe he really wants. Things that he thinks would be, fun playmates. And his mom is kind of talking to him about what it could be, what it is, what it isn't. And finally comes to the realization that only human mommies can have human babies. And they kind of go through some funny scenarios, like, wouldn't it be funny if a dog had a human baby? And the illustration from Stephanie Alianto is so fantastic. And she is just truly a phenomenal sketch artist. And so the illustrations are just absolutely gorgeous and go along so well with the story and are really fun. And so we do touch a little bit on traditional gender roles at the end of the book, just how important moms and dads are and how, the roles of mom and dads are so important. And, mom's roles are to give life and to nurture that life. And, father's roles are to protect us and to protect children and moms and families. And so we do talk a little bit about that at the end and how boys can't have babies, because that is a question that little Luke asked toward the end of the book. And so we kind of run the gamut here with sort of some of the social issues that our children might face today. And Yeah, I think people will really like it. I did not read the book to my kids before it came out, and I wanted them to be able to see the book and hold it and flip the pages with them. And I can tell you, my 5-year-old, this is what we have read now every single night since we have gotten the copy in our home. He loves it. He laughs every time that we, get to a certain point in the book, and my kids are loving it. And I hope that your kids will love it too.
What is your main hope that children take away from this book, and adults too? Are there any messages in this book that you think would resonate with adults?
Well, I hope that everyone reading it will just walk away feeling like, this is a topic that we should talk to our children about. Nowhere in the book is abortion talked about or anything like that. And people ask me all the time, like, I do have 8 children, and people ask me all the time, Abby, how do you talk to your kids about abortion? And to be perfectly honest, I don't, I've never really had to sit down and have like a one-on-one abortion discussion with my children at a young age, because we have just taught them from a very young age that life is sacred. And we have taught them that babies are to be protected in the womb. And we have shown them ultrasound images of babies, and we have shown them, they've grown up seeing ultrasound images of their siblings in the womb. And they know that babies have heartbeats in the womb, and they know that, they've seen little wiggly babies on ultrasounds. And every time they see a pregnant woman, they're like, oh my gosh, look, there's a baby in her belly. And so just to feel comfortable, for parents to feel comfortable having those types of conversations, and to open up that dialogue with children and their parents, and for kids to know that there's no silly questions to ask their parents about life and about their bodies. And so I think that, this can be a good icebreaker for parents to start talking to your kids young about what's happening to their bodies, what's happening to their parents' bodies, that, your bodies are not shameful, that they're, God-given to all of us, and that it's okay for them to ask questions. And we are an activist family, so I've always taken my kids out to pray in front of abortion clinics. And I remember, when the topic of abortion did come up, when they, finally did kind of ask, like, what is an abortion? And we described it in ways that they could understand. It was so horrifying to them, because they've just always grown up knowing that there is a child in the womb. And that's really all you have to teach them, is the truth, is God's truth, that, God has created an individual and unique human being in the womb that he loves, that he has a purpose for. And my children can't even imagine taking away that unique human life. And that starts though early. And it should start early. And hopefully books like this one can help open up that conversation.
Yeah, like you said, there's an innate understanding or sense of the value of life. And this is a great tool to help parents explain to their children and answer those questions as children ask them, like we know that they do. So where can people find this book?
So you can buy it really anywhere that books are sold. It's online everywhere. You can buy it on Focus on the Family's website, Tyndale's website. It's published together from Focus on the Family and Tyndale. You can buy it on Amazon. It had just a really awesome debut. So it's currently on back order on Amazon, but you can get it there. Surprisingly, even Target is selling it, which is kind of crazy. I'm not sure they know what the book is about, but that's okay. But yeah, everywhere is selling the book, and I would love for you to pick it up. Barnes and Noble. It's in, most Christian bookstores are selling it actually in the store. So I'd love for people to pick it up. And you don't have to be pregnant. I'm not pregnant, and I'm reading it to my kids. You don't have to be pregnant to read it to your kids. But it's just a good story about the sanctity of human life.
All right, appreciate that conversation there, and an interesting note that Target is carrying the book, and hey, we'll take the wins where you can get them, right? So while it's still out there. All right. Well, that's going to leave us with time for one last thing on the podcast today, this Inauguration Monday, And we're going to take a look at Mark 10:45. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. And then, Billy, this is so countercultural to what humanity, especially secular culture, views as what a God and what a savior should be like. They picture more of the, sort of warrior, conquering hero with defeating the enemy in a different way, right? And God definitely showed the conquering spirit, right, by conquering sin, but not in the way people expected. Very countercultural.
Yeah, serving other people, loving them, not just serving ourselves. It's very countercultural. And I think on Inauguration Day too, a reminder of what the president's role is in any leader, right, is to serve and not be served. So
yeah,
let's hope we can all each individually live that out in our lives as well.
All right, that's where we're going to leave it. Make sure you're getting on over to cbnnews.com, faithwire.com for more news from a Christian perspective. As I mentioned, bookmark it on the CBN News YouTube channel. So check it out. We will be on later today. We'll be on live, and we'll be carrying all the events of the day. Make sure you check that out. We'd love to have you join us. Lord willing, that creek don't rise. We'll be back tomorrow with more. God bless. See you then.